So the structured school year is ending, bringing on a more spontaneous summer. But if you're the parent who likes routines, these coming months might feel like a little bit of a struggle. So my next guest says flexibility is the solution. Today she'll help us dive and develop more of it in our parenting. Pediatric Psychologist Dr. Ann-Louise Lockhart is joining me with ways to become a more flexible parent. Hello, Dr. Lockhart. Welcome back to Studio 5.
Thanks, Brooke. Thanks for having me back.
I love this topic, especially as I just set up tied to the upcoming summer season, which we know is loosey-goosey. And we have a producer on this staff who often says we have to stay nimble. And I like that word, nimble, flexibility. It applies to parents. Why do you find that flexibility is so important for parents, especially during this upcoming summer months?
That's a fantastic question. Well, because although kids strive with some level of structure, they also need to learn how to adapt when circumstances change. So This is mental flexibility. And that mental flexibility is something that parents need to model for their kids, because as they see parents doing it, then they can do it as well too. So that structure, going from that school year to the lack of structure in the summer, can really wreak havoc in our homes.
We often talk about that look in the mirror moment, and I don't want to ride on the negative side of the street, but sometimes it's easiest to see ourselves when we identify what we don't want to be. So I'll ask it this way. What does a non-flexible parent look like? What does non-flexible parenting look like?
Yeah, so a non-flexible parent is someone who has rules, but isn't willing to reconsider or adapt when circumstances change. So like when their kid gets older, or when they hit a different developmental stage, or when they show some maturity and parents basically stay stuck. They had this rule when they were 5, so it's a rule when you're 10. Yeah. And that's a lot of mental kind of non-flexible parenting, and that's what that looks like.
They're growing, they're changing. We've got to grow and change and adapt as well. I'm with you. You've got 5 ways parents can become more flexible. I like the idea of training or practicing toward this characteristic. First, you say we need to stop taking our kids' behaviors so personally.
Yes, this is a big one, Brooke. I hear this often in my parent coaching sessions, and I experience this myself as a parent at times. So say our kid does something rude or disobedient or sassy, and we think, or maybe we say it, really? After everything I've done for you? Or you should be grateful, or I struggled and I turned out fine.
Yeah.
And so those things, when we do that, we are not looking at our kids. We're not focusing on them. And that's what I hear often from kids and teens, is that they don't like it when their struggle becomes personalized for the parent, that they make it about them. And so if we're not in the equation, we should not put ourselves in it. We have to see our kid as struggling and see it as their struggle, not because there's something about us. We have to take ourselves out of that.
If we're not in the equation, don't put yourself in it. And I laugh, Dr. Lockhart, only because those phrases sound so familiar. And when you do remove them from the situation, you're like, why am I saying that? Why do we say that? Don't put yourself in the equation.
Well, we say that because we're taking it personally, because that's something that we've heard. We are mimicking the things based on the way we were parented. And so those things tend to come out in our parent talk.
Okay. To be more flexible, you say, before we respond, there needs to be a pause.
Yes. So pausing and taking a breath before responding, because when we're triggered mentally, psychologically, physically, our body responds physically. So our nervous system gets out of whack, our blood pressure goes up, our body temperature rises, our heart starts to race. Maybe we have muscle tension in the back of our neck. So when you can pause and take a breath, what you're doing is you're slowing down your body, you're relaxing your body, you're being more in control of yourself, and this will help to regulate your physical body so that the words coming out of your mouth are more intentional and responsive rather than reactive.
What a cool connection. You explained that so well. You also point out, though, not everything needs a response. In pursuit of flexibility, some things can just land.
Yes. Well, because when we're emotionally triggered by our kids, we get stuck in a negative feedback parent-child loop. We say something, they say something, we say something, and we think that someone needs to win the battle, but it just ends up being like this never-ending war. So instead, we have to take a step back and choose not to respond in that moment, maybe not that minute, maybe not that hour, or maybe not at all. So, because what I often hear from my clients, my teen and child therapy clients, is they already know when they've messed up. They already know when they've just not kind of missed the mark. They don't need to be reminded about something they already feel bad about. And that's something I struggle with as well, too. Lots of parents do. So we have to make sure that we're not always responding to every single thing all the time.
I love your words. You're so wise. You're so wise in what you say and how you say it. I'm going to that moment where I might want to, you know, the defensiveness comes up. You describe the physical reaction so well. Like I'm wanting to push back. I'm being triggered. And you say in those moments, we can pause and ask ourselves why, like what's behind this energy?
Yes, I think that's one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves in the moment is why am I being triggered in this moment? And this one ties in nicely with the one we just discussed because after the pause and deciding not to impulsively react, when we ask ourselves this question, why am I being triggered? Then we can say, okay, well, when they did this same thing, I laughed and I thought it was hilarious. But then they did the next thing the next day, the same thing the next day, and I gave them the look and I lectured them and maybe I yelled. So why? Like their behavior is the same. What has changed is us. Maybe we had a nap the day that we thought it was funny. Maybe we spoke to a friend or had a good lunch. And so maybe the next day when we reacted negatively, maybe we missed a nap, maybe we got food poisoning, maybe we got ghosted by a friend. Well, that's not our kids' issue, that's our issue. And so we have to take responsibility for our own triggers and be more flexible with our thinking and not see our kids as always needing to be like spoken to all the time.
Yes. In conclusion, Dr. Lockhart, how can we adjust our mind? Because I think it's one thing to say, I'm going to be more flexible, you know, and I can push through that as a mom. I can like go through the motions and go through the actions and let it land and let it go. But, you know, the connection comes when our mind is engaged. So how can we adjust our parenting mindset to a more flexible summer way of living?
Yes. So I think it involves everything we talked about, that we have to understand what mental flexibility is. We have to model that for our kids. We have to stop taking the behaviors personally, pause and take a step, ask ourselves the important questions like, why am I being triggered? All of that leads to a different mindset because, again, most of us parent the way we were parented. We try to be just like or nothing like our parents, but we have to create our own parent identity. And so we have to know, like, what does boundaries mean? What do the rules mean in our home? And adjusting, like, I can parent in this way. And have fun with it. Like parenting is hard enough. We don't have to make it harder and miserable by being sticky and inflexible.
Yes, yes. I say amen, sister, to everything you've said. Thank you so very much. Where can we get more from you?
So they can find me on my website at anewdaysa.com or at Instagram at dr.Ann-Louise.Lockhart.
I love what you share over on Instagram. I follow you there. We'll link you to both from our website if you want a connection point to Dr. Lockhart and all her wisdom that she shares. Thank you for making time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Brooke.